Well, we welcome all of you from near and far to tonight's Hunger Fall Symposium, and I'm so glad that you're able to join us for this special event. I'm Laura Yoder, and I direct the Hunger Program. And tonight's speakers come from Abara, which is an organization on the US-Mexico border in El Paso. That's their headquarters, and the sister city of Ciudad Juarez, just across a small bridge, right, over the border. Abara exists to foster understanding and connections that uplift border communities. And Abara creates physical and relational spaces to help people identify and grapple with and overcome the fears that can divide us, to connect with each other in new ways so we might not have imagined possible. And in doing so, this helps to build peace. Their new-ish property is adjacent to the US border fence. I think we might see that in the course of their talk. And they have a vision for this place as one of connection, of binational celebrations with participants on both sides of the border. We were talking yesterday that Abara's work has some roots in the Beatitudes. So to open our time tonight, I wanted to read some selections from Luke 6 that has, some of you would know, that has a striking geographic reference pertinent to our time tonight that is not in the Beatitudes of Matthew 5. So these words from Luke 6. Jesus went down with them, his 12 disciples, and stood on a level place. A large crowd of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea and Jerusalem, and from the coastal region around Tyre and Sidon, ancient cities that were historic enemies of Israel. And also important as where we see Jesus reaching beyond boundaries of his own day to extend God's grace to the Gentiles. So this great number of people from all over, including enemies and religious others, who had come to hear Jesus and to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by impure spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him, because power was coming from him and healing them all. Looking at his disciples, Jesus said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, because great is your reward in heaven, for that is how their ancestors treated the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you, for that is how their ancestors treated the false prophets. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. Do to others as you would have them do to you." And now to introduce our speakers. I'll introduce them in the order in which I met them. I met Sami just about when I started here, 12, 13 years ago. So coming to us from El Paso, Texas. Any Texans here tonight? One? Okay. Sami DiPasquale was born in Jordan and raised in the Middle East, and has spent the past 2 decades in the US working in refugee resettlement and community development and peace building. Sami graduated in interdisciplinary studies, majored in sustainable development from Wheaton College, and has a master's in international business. After graduating from Wheaton, he served with World Relief for 3 years, working with the Arabic-speaking refugee population in our region here. And he has served on the boards of CCDA, which is the Christian Community Development Association, and also on the board of Micah Global. These are networks striving for thriving communities free from poverty and injustice, nationally and internationally. And Sami is fascinated by the history and dynamics of borderlands, drawn to explore the beauty, and the pain that define these regions, with a particular interest in the intersection of global and local narratives. And as the executive director of Abara, Sami's lifelong vision is to bridge divides and cultivate mutual flourishing. So Sami married a fellow Wheatie from El Paso, followed her home, and they have 4 children, aged 13 to 22. They worship at St. Clement's Anglican Church, which was founded in 1870, just 10 years after Wheaton College. It is the oldest Protestant church between Brownsville, Texas, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. In 2020 and 2021, during COVID, Sami welcomed 3 hunger students to learn with them on the Texas-Mexico border with his Abara team, and one of them went on to serve on Abara's staff after graduation. And coming to us from Charlotte, North Carolina, Angelica Acosta Garnett, or Lika, was born in Bogota, Colombia, immigrated to the US at 17, and has since dedicated her career to bridging language and culture in education, advocacy, and immigrant support. She holds degrees in history, religion, and education, and has been an educational and legal interpreter since 2006, and an immigration paralegal. As the director of Abara's Asylum Narrative Translation Project, Angelica helps asylum seekers on both sides of the US-Mexico border to process their journeys, to share their stories of departure, and to help them to create legal narratives that meet the legal standards for asylum petitions. Angelica is also a speaker and trainer, leading workshops for groups and organizations that seek to better understand and support immigrant communities. She heads the Immigration Network for all of CCDA, the Christian Community Development Association, and trains churches in the intersection of immigration and faith. Her work reflects a deep commitment to justice and learning and empowering immigrant voices. Lika and her husband, who's from Montana, have 3 bicultural bilingual kids between 8 and 14, and she is an elder at the Presbyterian Church and is very passionate about her faith. So we will hear from them, then we will have a time of question and answer. There are note cards on the ends of the aisles where we would encourage you to write your questions for the speakers, which we'll then collect, and they will be able to sort and combine them at the end of their talk. And then afterward, we invite you, please, to come linger outside with, we have cider and snacks. So please stay for that. Please join me in welcoming Sami and Lika.
Hi. Thank you for having us at Wheaton. I see a lot of friendly faces of people that already endured us in their classes, and so we're not too bad because you came back, so thank you so much. And Laura did a great job interviewing or introducing us, and Sami and I decided we were still going to show you a picture of our kids. So those are my 3 kids, and that's my husband, and now you get to show yours.
All right. Is this on? Is this working? No? Is that working? Can you hear me? No? Should I just use that? What do you think?
Okay, I'll use this. This is not my family. There's my family. So this is my wife and 4 kids. It's a couple years old. But yeah, I think the rest is covered. It's an honor to be with you all today. We've met or seen some of you the last couple of days. Sometimes some of you we've known for many years. Just wanted to start by sharing a little bit about Abara. So we're a nonprofit. We're located on the El Paso, Texas and Mexico border. We're rooted on both sides of the border. We have teams on both sides of the border. So we're a binational team with offices on both sides. Abara, like growing up in the Middle East and ending up on the US-Mexico border, I had to bring a little bit of Arabic to the border. So that's where the name Abara, the roots, come from. It's similar in Hebrew too, so it means river ford or crossing. And that really reflects, I think, our desire as we're attempting to cultivate spaces where people can move in humility across the divides of our time, both these divides on the border, but by extension, so many other divides in our world. This is our mission, to create physical and relational spaces where connections build peace, leading to collective flourishing on the border and beyond. We're working in 3 main areas. Abara House is this peace building center where we really hope people can connect, learn, and take meaningful action in relation to some of these divides of our time. Border encounters or immersive experiences that foster understanding and empathy, usually 3 days, immersive listening pilgrimages to try to listen deeply to the voices of the borderland and then discern how to move forward in meaningful action. And then border response, partnering with shelters, migrant shelters to provide resources for displaced neighbors. So that just gives a backdrop for what we'll be talking about today, which we're talking about dehumanization through history and where that leads us to today and how, just trying to think through how do we move forward in that context. And so Lika's going to share a little bit here, where we're just going to be passing it back and forth.
So we want to start our time together, kind of setting the stage for the moment that we are in right now in the United States. So we are in an era or a time marked by political polarization, social unrest, and this quest for unity feels very daunting. If you ask me today, I would say it feels impossible. However, we find that it's very important to understand the roots of these divisions and the fear, and how this fear gives way or paves the way for collaborating and talking openly and having dialogue, like kind of understanding where this is coming from, these ideas that we are accepting about others and about our neighbors, and why are we even accepting and engaging with that kind of language. And so the question is kind of understanding how did we get here, and then understanding what is the feeling that's driving this language and the fact that we are attaching to this language. So we believe that at the heart of our differences lies a pervasive sense of fear. And I think that fear, as you are quite familiar, it's a primal feeling of a human being. And so we can all relate to that idea of feeling afraid. And when we are afraid, we don't stay open-handed, or we don't stay open or curious, or we basically just go like this. Our posture changes completely when we are afraid. And so the fear is of what? Of the things we don't know, of losing our cultural identity, maybe economic instability. And so it's really essential to acknowledge what's driving our movement right now, what's driving our division. It is really rooted on fear. And I really like what Professor Vader had to say from Chapman University. He says, understanding what we are afraid of isn't about stoking anxiety. It's about putting those fears into context. Often the events that capture the most media and social media attention are rare and unusual, but because they are highlighted so vividly and so often, they can feel like daily threats. So recognizing that difference helps us regain perspective and power over our own emotions. So I think that's how we want to start, in setting the stage of saying we are really divided. A lot of these divisions and the way that we are talking about each other, the way we feel each other, the way we understand each other is rooted in fear. And we can choose to ignore that, or we can choose to ask questions. Like, what is exactly what I am afraid of? And in a lot of conversation with churches, with people, a lot of the ideas that resonate is this fear of there's not enough. And so it's basically a posture of scarcity. There's not enough. Like, there's too many people coming, so we're gonna run out of all these good things. Or there's the fear of like, well, things are going to change. If all of a sudden we have an influx of all these different people with their different ideologies and their different understanding of the world or their languages, what I know is going to change, and I don't like change, so I'm afraid of change. So it's really important to kind of start asking questions of what is this fear, and can we name it? And then from there we can move on. But I think what Sami's going to take you on this journey of where did we even get to this idea of making the other, the person that we're really afraid of, or the person that is making us feel protective over ourselves, our ideas, and our stuff. How did we even get there? And we're going to try to frame this in the conversation around immigration, because this is a very pressing subject right now that has to do with dehumanization, so we want to talk about that.
Thank you, Lika. So my name, Sami DiPasquale, my first name is Arab, my last name is Italian, and both cultures use their hands a lot. So I'm always in trouble if I'm carrying a microphone, because I want to be doing this, so if I'm doing that and the microphone's not close enough here, let me know. I think a struggle for Lika and I right now in this time is trying to, I think, name a moment that feels so heavy for many of us, and maybe has felt very heavy for 5 years or 10 years or 12 years as various communities around the US have felt targeted or otherized, as well as around the world. And it was mentioned, I've been on the border now for 20-some years. This is a picture of the property where we now find ourselves based. Let me see if this works. So what you see there up at the top and along the edge is the US-Mexico border fence. So what's in the background there, at the top right, is in Mexico, and then what's in the foreground is in the US. And this is the property that we now find ourselves stewarding. We wanted to use this as a backdrop because as we're looking at the current day realities, you see this fence. This picture was taken a bit ago, and now, just a couple months ago, there's been layers of razor wire put on the top of the fence. And over the last number of years, even more layers of militarization just past the fence. So as we're looking at today's realities at this border fence, we found ourselves looking back in history through this actual site. So I'm going to zoom in here. Let's see if this goes. This picture on the left is actually a zoomed in part of, no, it's not going back. Oops. If you look up at the top of the space, not at the very top, but maybe where that man is standing to the left, there are 3 historic markers. And the markers are what's showing up here on the left. Now, we found ourselves wandering around over the years looking at these markers, and they end up, I think, drawing us into a sense of history and story of the Americas over the last 500 years. So there's 3 historic markers. The one in the middle really commemorates the arrival of the Spanish in 1598. It is saying that this is the spot where Juan de Oñate arrived in 1598, crossed the river, and claimed the land for the King of Spain and for God. Then on the right, there's a marker, a historic marker that talks about, in 1848, the arrival of the US. Western expansion, manifest destiny. And then the one on the marker on the left is about this man, Simeon Hart, who builds a mill and then a house, and brought with him African-American slaves before the Civil War, and then supported the Confederacy since the Civil War. So you have these 3 markers. And so we want to look at almost like the last 500 years at Oñate's crossing and how that maybe leads us into it. It gives us a little bit of an indication of what's happening today. So we'll start with just the arrival of Juan de Oñate. So we know that colonization obviously spread around the world from Europe. And many of you might know this too, that the doctrine of discovery was basically the church's baptism of colonization. So you had this European expansion, of course, political, economic, but we had the European powers and the Pope who actually gave language to this, and here's one of the quotes. "We grant you, the kings of Spain and Portugal, by these present documents with our apostolic authority, full and free permission to invade, search out, capture, and subjugate all Saracens and pagans whatsoever and other enemies of Christ, wherever they may be, as well as their kingdoms, duchies, counties, principalities, and their property, and to reduce their persons to perpetual servitude." So we obviously have this language of dehumanization that the church is putting forth to give the okay to colonization. And that's sort of that first wave represented by that one historic marker that we see on the property. This then is sort of carried on under the Spanish, where they would say the requerimiento, which was a formal declaration that was read by conquistadors, including the man who arrived in 1598. And this is some of what it said. Like if we look over on the right, he would have read this as he came across. And he did so when he went up the Rio Grande River, and he read this document. This is actually up there on the top right. That picture is supposed to be him sort of with that document in his hand as he came across the river. And so you could say that we shall powerfully enter into your country and shall make war against you in all ways and manners that we can. And we shall take you and your wives and your children and shall make slaves of them. And we protest that the deaths and losses which shall accrue from this are your fault if you don't accept Christianity. So we have this arrival of Europeans coming to what's now the United States in 1598 under this guise. The second monument, or that second historic marker, then talks about the westward expansion under Manifest Destiny. So we have Manifest Destiny as an ideology here in the US, and it uses this divine rhetoric, right, to sanctify conquest and justify domination. And many Americans believe that this was both inevitable and morally justified. And it combined sort of this Protestant ideology and was in some ways an equivalent coming alongside the doctrine of discovery. And we see that in this historic marker. And I'm talking about this because as we see this in the land where we are every day right now, we pass by these markers, our offices are right there, and we're trying to think, if this land could speak, what are the stories that it would tell? Here are a couple of, let you read a couple of these quotes related to Manifest Destiny. People by one nation, speaking one language, professing one general system of religious and political principles. It's our manifest destiny to overspread the continent. That led to what we see here as the annexation of Texas, the Mexican-American War, and then at the end of it, the property we were on became part of the United States. So there was 250 years of colonized history before even the United States expanded in that direction. But both of these movements, both with colonization and then initial colonization under the Spanish, but then later Manifest Destiny, those were both movements that were sanctioned by the church in saying that one group of people was more of human beings than another group of people, and it was always privileging the European origins over everybody else. We know a lot more probably about this in relation to slavery and white supremacy and that belief system and the moral and legal justification that came for colonization, for the genocide of indigenous peoples, the enslavement of African Americans. And that third monument that I mentioned, this man, Simeon Hart, who built a house on the land that we're on, he built a mill and then built this house. And he had brought with him enslaved African Americans, possibly the farthest west sanctioned slavery under states that were part of the United States that we know of. So on this landing, we have the intersection of colonization, manifest destiny, westward expansion, and slavery justified through white supremacy, all in one place, on one location. And we see that intersection right now on the edge of a fence that is stopping people from making the trip up north, or, blocking, separating people from one another as they make a journey north. Of course, underwriting all of this, there's a lot of ideology related to American exceptionalism, this special place of the United States almost in the kingdom of God. And it uses covenantal, if we look at the bottom there, these assumptions, it uses covenantal language even, like this is a new Israel. Like, look at the bottom of the quote here, we Americans are the peculiar chosen people, the Israel of our time. That was in 1850. So we're using this covenantal language between God and his people and connecting it to a nation state. that is connecting the dots between all of these different pieces that we just talked about. And of course, leading in today to much of what we talked about, what is thought of as Christian nationalism, often tied in with maybe white Christian nationalism, about who are God's chosen people at this time, in this place, in the world. So if we take all of those things together, and we see these 500 years of history of dehumanization, of privileging a certain group of people over another, even just on this one piece of land, this 1 acre, now 5 acres that we steward, we see those connections come together in a really disturbing way. So then when we move into some of what Lika's going to share now related to our current day and some of the policies, there's a whole lot of connections we can see given that backdrop. So I'll pass it on to Lika to share some about that.
So as Sami was speaking, when you look at all of those historic roots and all of those movements that are going to basically put a category or a group of people above everyone else, right? You are exceptional solely because you were born in the United States. That's going to create a separation between those that are from here and those that are not from here. And people from the United States are going to hold this idea that America is number one, that this is the best country in the world, and you're going to start seeing narratives like everybody is coming here because they are pursuing the American dream, right? Because everybody wants to have the American dream. This is the best country in the world. And this starts seeping through culture. And so it's a lot of these thoughts are things that people say flippantly, like, oh yeah, this is the best country in the world. Or you would hear comments in passing, like everyone's just dying to come live in the United States. As a non-US person, those are very interesting comments to hear. Because I didn't grow up hearing that, and I didn't grow up believing that. So it is curious to see so much repeated, and people were not even being nasty, they were just sharing their common beliefs and their common set of values as being seen as the best, as number one. That's such an American thing. And so I want you to pay attention to that. We're better than language, or we're number one, or we're the best, or we are, as Sami was saying, exceptional. And I've always said, like, no, this is a great country, but mine is too. You know, this is a great people, but my people are too. Like, it doesn't have to be, you know, lesser than, because if you're the only one at the top, then everybody else is at the bottom. So immediately you're creating a hierarchy that makes you top dog, and therefore everybody else is below you. And so pay attention to that, because we're going to see it in this current moment. So present day, what we're seeing in our immigrant communities and what we are ingesting as immigrants, we are seeing this language of fear that is designed purposefully to create fear. Remember how I said at the very beginning, like fear is the emotion that is being stoked, and you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to the fact that we are moving a particular way and people are responding with fear. And I'm going to show you in a second. This is not me being cute or on AI. If you go to eyes.gov, this is the current recruiting poster for one of our agencies. And it has more stuff in the bottom, but I want you to pay close attention to what it says. America needs you, fellow citizens. America has been invaded by criminals and predators. We need you to get them out. I don't know if I have history majors in the house. I'm a history major. If you were studying World War I, you would recognize probably that that was a commonly used poster to recruit people to go fight in World War I. Why are we using that? Why? Because they're trying to stoke fear, right? This is a war for the heart of America, and we need you. Why do we need you? Because we're being invaded. I'm sorry, invasion is an active word. When somebody tells me I'm being invaded, I don't say, oh, I'm so curious. I wonder why they're here. I wonder if they have any needs, or if I can come alongside. I want to activate my Christian beliefs. I go, holy crap, they're invading me. So I go from like a curious, maybe helpful, maybe loving posture to where are my kids, where is my stuff, lock up the house, put up the gate. Language matters. And so the language that we use to describe a moment is going to determine how we react. And all of a sudden, we're going to forget that we're talking about people, because it's no longer people. Now it's just criminals and predators. That's a very, very, very big blanket statement. So in our current moment, we, immigrants, have gone from aliens, it's always been such an interesting word, to foreign enemies and to local scapegoats. So let's start with the first one. We've always been different, because apparently when you are not born in the United States, you're automatically lesser than. And this is not something that anyone plainly told me, but it was very easy to figure out. January 17, year 2000, I am entering the United States. For those extremely worried about my entry, I came lawfully with a visa, so you can breathe. And the first thing that occurred is that they asked me, number one, what are you? That's a weird question. So I was putting in my little form, white, and I turned in the form, and the officer was like, and I grabbed my form, and I was like, oh, this is cool. So I just put black, because there's like, that's about it in Colombia, right? Like you're either from African descent or like everybody else is white or indigenous, and I for sure I'm not indigenous, so I was like, that's the other option. Oh, she got real hot very quickly, and I was like, I am clearly failing already. And she said to me, you are Latina. And I was like, that is the weirdest thing. And I remember saying to my dad when we were like leaving the airport, I was like, is that a color? Because I mean, if you could be black or white, am I like caramel, cinnamon, and I keep it? Like, is that what is that? So that is purely, entirely an American term and a label that people decided we need to carry to make you feel comfortable about our own existence. That's problematic. So as soon as you enter there, you're also told that you're an alien. If you want to know what alien is in Spanish, alien, same thing. It means extraterrestrial. It means I am not human. So I'm sorry. The moment that I planted my bottom in that American Airlines flight from Bogota to Miami, that's a 3-hour flight, did I lose my humanity? Did I transform from human to outer space, green, scary as heck creature just because I entered the United States? What the what? We don't even question it. And not only that, but you people, and I'm referring to all of America, love using the term illegal alien. How do you do that? I mean, like, pause for a second, because words matter. And so by using that terminology, you're a part of the system. First of all, I'm not an alien. I'm an immigrant. I'm a human being. I have the same organs, the same blood, the same thing you do. We were made by the same God. I'm not an alien. And second of all, people are not illegal. Actions are illegal, but people are not. But the fact that we hear our politicians say that, our pastors say that, and we just all keep on moving like nothing has occurred, that is us accepting dehumanizing language and othering. Because if I make those strange people lesser than and not human, then I'm going to put up with all the crazy stuff we're going to do because they're not really human. And so, as I said, we go from different. This was the Wall Street Journal, duh, yes, you can read, but it was May 2023. This was when Title 42 was lifted. And so there was this pervasive fear that because the border was no longer going to be closed, which ask me later when we're eating snacks what I meant by that, now we were going to have this invasion. And so this newspaper says, migrants swarm. And I remember being like, that does not sit well with me. I didn't have a quick definition, but it didn't sit well. So I went to Father Google and I was like, Father Google, define swarm. And it was a movement of insects. And I was like, this is masterful. Because, it's a little autobiographical, I have a phobia of roaches. So if you tell me that my sweet abode in Charlotte, North Carolina is going to be invaded by roaches, I would like a swift solution. I would like a mass deportation of these insects because I'm scared and they're gross. Watch for the language. People are not insects. But when I say to you that they're swarming, your mind is immediately thinking, ew, gross, lesser than. Please remove swiftly. And this was the language that we heard very quickly after. Because there's an invasion of the southern border, people are swarming, the response was what? Swift removal. And you didn't even stop to ponder because you're like, oh, thank God. Because if things are swarming, you call pest control. But humans are not swarming. Humans are moving. And that's a very human thing to do. So pay attention. Then we go to foreign enemies because now we're invading. And I just really, if you think I'm annoying, that's fine. I hear that a lot. But I really want you to have a little bit of like facts that you can hold on to. Because in these conversations, a lot of people tell me like, what are you asking then? That we just like open our doors and like, laissez-faire, it all goes. I was like, first of all, calm down, Karen. Because the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1952, the INA, has always determined that the United States of America is a nation of protected borders. So since we decided to create this code of immigration laws, we've never had a wide open door policy. So it's not like I'm asking you to do anything crazy. The statute says that we do these things. We have protected borders, and there's two key words. Before people can enter the United States, they need to be inspected and admitted. Inspected and admitted. This will become kind of like your little mantra. So just remember that. People are inspected and admitted into the United States. So we don't have like a wide open door that everybody gets to come and go. So you don't really need to be that scared. Okay? Because people are getting inspected and then admitted. On the right side, I'm showing you like this is basically when you're inspected and admitted, you would be given a piece of paper. And what I need people to understand that most people don't is that coming to the United States is extremely hard. And I am not a doctor, but I will officially diagnose you. You have blue passport syndrome. And what this means is that you think that traveling is the same for every person on earth. And that's not correct. You guys have blue passports. That means that you can be super cute one day and wake up and be like, today I shall have croissants by the Eiffel Tower. And you just whimsically buy that ticket and make it to Paris. Well, I was born Colombian. I have a red passport. And we have to get visas to go just about anywhere. So we do not have the freedom of movement that those of you with a blue passport have. And so when that is the case, you start judging people on their decisions and their need to move based on what you know. And so people will say really ignorant things like, well, if they're running for their life, they should just get a visa. And I cringe and I say, your ignorance is showing me. Because a visa to the United States is not only really time consuming. If I wanted a visa to come to the United States as a Colombian, I would have to ask for that in Bogota, and it's an 18-month process. Okay, so 18-month process to get, like, to apply and go for an interview. It's still not approved. And then the interview process is pretty complicated because they vet you. And I'm sorry if this offends anyone, but the United States doesn't like poor people. The United States has preferential treatment towards the rich. So when they check your bank account and they see that you're not a person of means, it's very quickly you're going to be denied. So that whole idea of like, oh, well, they should just come the, quote, right way, it's a very biased, small-minded, lack of information answer to a problem. So I just want you to understand that. People need a visa. But in the case of people that are asking for humanitarian help because they're running for their life, which is a lot of the times what happens when people get to the US-Mexico border, You do not have 18 months to sit and wait for a visa, because in 18 months you'll be dead. In 18 months your house will be burned. In 18 months your kid will be in a gang. So I need you to understand that. You are judging people, and you're judging people's decisions and need to move based on your travel experience. And that is not correct. Because immediately you are creating a hierarchy where you're saying, well, people should just do it the right way, like I do. Well, sure. It's like being at a club in Miami and you're just like a very pretty model-looking girl. You don't understand what waiting in line looks like. But I'm a real normal person, and I lived in Miami, and when I went clubbing, they would make me wait for a really long time. So it's like your privilege is showing. You have like either like hot girl syndrome or blue passport syndrome. You pick your illness. Also wanting to point this out to you, there is still language around invasion. There is still language of we are at war. We're still hearing language of still people are trying to invade. And I just want to show you some facts. So fiscal year 2025, Border Patrol has seen a crazy lowering of numbers. It's the lowest number of apprehensions at the US-Mexico border since 1970. And then the second piece that I want you to know is that September 2025, so this is last month, it was the 5th consecutive month where the United States had 0 releases. What does that mean? Let me back up, and I have to speak so fast, Sami's Angelica. Asylum is a legal right. You have a right to ask for help. The government can say, I don't want to help you. But as a person on the run, you have the legal right to ask for help. Make sure that you know that and it's abundantly clear to you. So when people come to the US-Mexico border, because that's what the law forces them to do, they have to be in person, they cannot do it from far away. When they come in person, they will state that they are afraid for their life, they cannot go back. What that number is basically telling you is that we have not allowed anybody to enter under that provision for the last 5 months. People have not been released. So what that means is that we currently have pretty much a dead asylum process. So dear smart Wheaton people, how are we being invaded? By asylum seekers that are not coming because they're not entering, and with, I guess, people we are seeing a decline, the biggest decline since 1970. Where are the invaders coming? Like, where's the invasion? I don't see it, the numbers don't support that. So we are having what, an invisible invasion? They're not coming. So if this is a matter of we're being under attack and people are not coming to attack us, then where are these bad people? Where are these others that are invading and criminal and predators? Where are they? Well, I would like for you to exercise your brain. Your neighbors just became criminals, and not because they violated the law, but because you changed the rules of the game. Explain that to me. I'm so glad you asked. There is only 3 pathways in the United States for you to become permanent. So most people enter the United States as non-permanent. They are non-immigrant visas. And if you want to stay in the United States, you need to be able to go the permanent route, which also known as a green card. And I can't explain the process because they will yell at me. Ask me during the snack time. But there's only 3 pathways. We call that blood, which is familial, sweat, if you're a high-skilled worker and a company is willing to throw down a lot of money to bring you in, or tears. It's if you happen to be, for example, an asylum seeker, someone on the run, or like somebody that's a victim of a crime, will make a way for you to stay permanently in the United States. Everyone else, good luck. So I hope you're paying attention. This is an invitation to be creative. Because this is not a crisis, it's just a lack of creativity. We could create more pathways, but we only have 3. So what happens with all of these neighbors that we love? You know DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the people that entered as kids. Obama passed that program in 2012. And we basically just created, I'm going to call them umbrellas. Because deferred action basically means you did not come with a visa, right? And you showed up here, so I have the right to remove you. But you've been here for a long time, you didn't ask to come here because you were a kid, you've not broken the law, you've been educated here, we're gonna keep you. Problematic. And I want you to understand why problematic, because we're saying, I see you, but you don't matter. Oh, what do you mean? It means I see you, I won't deport you, you're gonna have to pay me every 2 years to work. I would like your taxes, but there's no permanent path for you. You will never be one of us. That's dehumanizing. That's our DACA kids in an umbrella. Now you have temporary protected status. Lots of different nationalities. And basically, the government says the country that you're from does not have good conditions for you to go back. So we're going to allow you to stay because we want you to have protected status. But please understand that is 1, temporary, and 2, not permanent. What does that mean? That we can have members of our community that have been in TPS status for many, many, many years, aka the Hondurans, who have been here for a lot of years. One of my dear friends has been here for 20 years and has TPS. But we also say, we like you here, thank you for creating a business, thank you for having American children, thank you for buying property and investing, but you do not belong. There's no permanent path for you. Just from TPS to permanent, there's no such thing. You would have to either marry the American, have the American kids, wait 21 years, etc. The parolees, these are the people that get to the border and the US government, like that bouncer at the club, says you don't have a visa, so technically you don't have an invite to the party, but I'm going to let you in. Is that the fault of the immigrant? Did they hop any fence? Did they parachute into anywhere? Or did the government just remove the door and say, please enter? That's lawful, but it's not permanent. What about those of us lovely overstayers? Hi, a criminal is addressing you. We enter with a visa. Our visas are temporary, so they have an expiry date. And so it's like either 1 or 2 years depending, because we're non-immigrant. There is no permanency for us. And so if the visa expires and you don't really have anywhere to go, what do? A lot of us overstay, right? So we're not we're not committing crimes. We are part of the community. A lot of us are educated here, and so we're overstayers. And till now, nobody had a problem, but there's no pathway for us. So it's also a very loud you don't belong, because you can't stay. And if you can't have a green card, you can never be a citizen, which means your voice doesn't matter because you can't vote, which is why we can never have reform, because we don't vote, because we can't. So I want you to imagine all of these people that are a part of your community. They are not invaders. They're already in your community. And for many years, they've been under an umbrella of protection. What happens when the government decides to shut down your umbrella? It means you no longer have legal status. And that is how your neighbors become criminals. That, city people of Chicago, is how you all of a sudden have all these criminal Venezuelans. Okay, pause for thought. Did you ever see Venezuelans like parachuting into Chicago? I didn't. Did the Venezuelans have the ability to teleport? And I'm just finding out. Maybe I should have gone to Venezuela to learn teleporting. They arrived in your community in 2021, in 2023. And they were not jumping fences or invading anyone. They entered lawfully. They became a part of your community. And all of a sudden, the umbrella was closed and they went from lawful to unlawful. They didn't do anything. And so now all of a sudden we keep saying those criminal Venezuelans. And if you go to the ICE website and you look for Chicago raid, you're going to see that it says 800 of the worst, double worst criminals were apprehended. And it says they're pedophiles, drug dealers, gangsters, and rapists. And the question to you would say, well, then your law enforcement, pardon my French, sucks. Because you had 800 of those very, very, very bad people all concentrated in one neighborhood? I mean, I watched the FBI TV show and they seem to know what they're doing. This is not possible. But we believe because they're telling us that they're criminals. And all of a sudden, our neighbors became criminals because now we're an easy scapegoat, right? If I'm trying to tell you that we are less than human because we're aliens, and now you're concerned about the way that we entered, and you call us illegal, and then we became invaders, but you don't have the numbers to justify that, then you tell us that we're criminals in your communities. But we've been there for a really long time. And we are not criminals. We just lost our status. By nothing we did, the system did. So ask better questions. So your neighbors have become threats. And we lose the ability to connect and to have empathy. That is the language of fear. I still cannot believe this came out of the mouth of a representative. And this is a direct quote. You can look it up, and it's a video, so it's not even being misquoted. I have to tell you, one of my favorite things to watch on YouTube these days are the court hearings, where illegals are in court and ICE shows up to drag them out of court and deport them. That is dehumanizing language. Because I don't care what your politics are, I don't care what your policy ideas are, you should not be celebrating that people are being detained and dragged and their rights are being violated. There's nothing to be celebrated. But see, she didn't say hearings where family members, hearings where dads, hearings where moms, hearings where students. She said illegals. So your brain immediately said lesser than human. It doesn't matter. Not my people.
I'm trying to rush through a whole lot of information, so thank you. One of the things we really obviously wanted to get to today is to think through with you, with each other, and hear from you too, just ways to engage our faith given this current reality. So we know from Scripture and through the history of our faith that all of us are made in God's image, right? Worthy of honor and respect. From Genesis to Revelation, the book ends. We know that Christianity is a global religion. It's not just a national faith. So what do we do with non-American Christians? What do we do with non-European origin Christians? I know for myself, one of the really incredibly distressing times for me was when the U.S. invaded Iraq. And I had friends in Iraq, right? I had Muslim friends, I also had Christian friends. So what do you do if the faith has gotten so intertwined with a national identity that we're going out there to save something, and yet then we are bombing brothers and sisters in Christ? Where is our allegiance, right? To who is our allegiance? Or right now, for the last 2 years for me has been incredibly hard with everything that's been happening in Israel and Gaza, and knowing friends who are in Gaza and family members and friends, even in churches that are being bombed, and it's with the support of churches here in the U.S. Oftentimes. What about when there's Honduran Christians at the border, or those who are arriving at the border? Oftentimes, with people visiting through the years, there's an interest in evangelizing, right? To be like, are you sharing the gospel with those who are arriving at the border? And typically a response is like, come to the border and listen to the stories and hear from people where they're at and pray with them and see what you sense in terms of their faith in Jesus Christ. Because I don't, with all the hundreds, probably thousands of people that I've interacted with one-on-one, I don't know one person who isn't yearning for our prayers and who hasn't turned around, almost all of them turned around and started praying for me in such a sense of the Spirit that you're like, oh wow, like this, like there's something there that is so much deeper than I have with the God that has sustained someone on this journey. Right leading up to the formation of Abara, I went on a trip to Central America, to Honduras, to El Salvador, to Guatemala, trying to understand what was happening on the ground. Why were so many people arriving to the border? Met with grassroots leaders, met with many pastors, faith leaders, a few politicians. One question that we would ask to everybody, is there something you would like people in the United States to know? Do you have a message for people in the U.S.? And if it was a faith leader, if it was a church leader, if it was a Christian, we say, do you have a message for the church in the United States? Is there something you wish you could tell the church in the United States? And the thing that broke me was from a man, this humble, kind, gentle pastor, sitting in his little church in a distressed community in Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. It was an extremely dangerous city at the time, and he was, after all the stories that they just shared around this table with members of his church, you're hearing about all of the challenges that they're facing and people that have fled their own church. And we posed that question, what do you wish, what's your message for the church in the U.S.? And he looked at us with all sincerity and gentleness and love, and he's like, please share with the church in the United States that we're not animals. It's like we're brothers and sisters in Christ arriving at your doorstep. And if you only knew who was arriving and if they were welcomed into your church, they would be such an incredible blessing to your church. It's like, these are our worship leaders, right? These are like our pastors. These are our brothers and sisters. And as we're sitting around this table, there's many people who had just come to help provide hospitality for our little group. And one after the other, they're just inserting them in the conversation because they just can't help themselves. One lady was like, I know I'm not supposed to be talking, but please, like, I just want to share. My son, he was a policeman, and he was shot 3 times by the cartel. And then he ran away to another town. He was targeted there. He ran to my mother's village, like his grandmother's village out in the mountains. He was found there. So he finally left the country, and he's escaping through Mexico. I don't even know where he is right now and what part of the process he's in. It's like, these are our family members. These are brothers and sisters in Christ. We see this information on that item C there, that 20% of Christians in the U.S. actually even list the Bible as the source for their views about immigration. And yet we're saying that we're being formed, and that's what, if we're a Christian nation, but we're not even informing the views based on Christianity or the Bible, what does that say? And Lika might say more about this, but how, like, we would have no Christianity without migration. The stories of migration are littered throughout our sacred texts. In fact, as we're studying, as we talk through a theology of migration and what we see based on the Bible in all of these different stories, more often than not, those who are writing and those who are sharing in the Bible are people on the move. Right? They are actually people on the move, not necessarily people who are receiving someone on the move. Where do we fall in that story? Where do the people of God, where do the people of the church fall into that story? So just linking it back to the very beginning, we were trying to rush through the sort of the 500 years, sort of 500-year roots of maybe Christian nationalism at the border and ways that we have dehumanized various groups over those centuries, linking it into maybe like what Lika was just sharing about some of the dehumanizing language today. The question, I think, for all of us is like, what do we do? Who do we want to be as followers of Jesus? Are we going with this sort of state-sanctioned theology, or a theology that's sanctioning the state? Or are we involved in the prophetic work of Jesus on the margins, representing those who are on the move and who are suffering, and sort of the voice from the wilderness, from the edge, calling out truth to those in power. Vika, you want to share a little about these four?
But I actually wanted to stop here for a second, because this is, as a person on the receiving end of dehumanizing language, right? Because by all standards, I am not from here. I'm also non-majority culture. What happens when your faith gets hijacked by a nationality, a country, a group of people that proceed to tell you you're lesser than? That's very violent on your understanding of yourself. And so the question would be, if we are text people, which I like to claim I am, I like to say of myself that I'm a Genesis person. I believe that every human being was made in the image of God. If that's my guiding principle, then it should really change the way I engage the world, regardless of my government's policies, regardless of anything. And so I always tell people, like, if you are a follower of Jesus, if you are a lover of the text, which I am, I think in all the nerdy people in here that are my historians, like, we love text. And so it's like, anchor your practice by the text. Like, we're Genesis and we are Revelation people. And at the end, when God is making all things new, which I believe wholeheartedly, or else I might as well check out because it's really scary and awful right now, I have to believe that there's a plan and that God is going to make all things new. And he says when he makes all things new in Revelation 7, that it's all tribes and all peoples and all languages will be praising God. It does not say there will be closed captioning and interpretation provided for the non-English speakers. And the white folks will be at the very front because they're the ones that God can stand, and brown and black people will be in the back. It doesn't say that. So what and where is our allegiance? Are you American first or are you Christian first? I'm not here to tell you. I'm just here to ask you to wrestle, because you're in an existential moment that's going to beg you to act. And so are you a person of the text? And if you don't know, that's great. Go to the text and stop over-contextualizing it from like an American point of view. Because what if on the top left, I showed you Moses. Why is it cool and courageous that a woman that is being oppressed by empire puts her baby in a basket through the river for safety? And we hail that mom as a hero of our faith, but we judge the moms that have to put their kids through the Rio Grande for safety. Why? What if I told you that instead of thinking that the book of Ruth is a love story, and the Christian ladies in the US are always told, just wait for your Boaz. Guys, Ruth is a story of migration. It's a story of double migration. It is not a bunch of verses for your wedding. Quit over-romanticizing and over-contextualizing the text. It's a beautiful story of women that have nothing, that are migrants either one way or the other, and that no matter what they choose, they're going to lose. And they hold on to each other and they're like, we're in it to win it. Like, the Bible is the most beautiful collection of immigrant, migrant stories of movement on people in the margins. So that's Ruth. We have a lot of Ruths. She might be the one putting lettuce and tomatoes on your table, right? And what if I told you that this could have been a shot of when Jesus was a little baby and he had to escape in the middle of the night to Egypt? That's an asylum seeker. They went to a neighboring country and they crossed a land barrier, and they did not have a visa, and they were not forced to stay outside. They were able to enter because they were running and fleeing and they were afraid for their life. And we're very happy to expand our imagination and say, like, yeah, totally. An angel showed up to Joseph and said, your baby's at risk, hustle to the border and cross. But if I told you today that there was a man with a 2-year-old and a lady at the border because they had a dream that they had to come, you would be like, bananas. These people are crazy. So did God stop speaking? Because apparently God went mute. And apparently he revealed all his promises to the US. I don't know. But I'm like, the text is peppered with these moments. So is it beyond our understanding that maybe God is having some of his people move? Like, I don't know. I would ask better questions. And what if we would maybe reframe Joshua and the migrant caravan? That's the first migrant caravan in the Bible. Because it tells you the whole people of God, they're all moving with their animals, with their mother-in-law, with their possessions. That's a big amount of people on the move. Well, the same, you have a big, large amount of people on the move. And so it's kind of like wrestling with these ideas. Christianity has been on the move forever. We wouldn't even have the name Christians if it hadn't been for migration. So how can we be so anti-immigrant? It doesn't commute. So I'm just imploring and begging, if you are the people of Jesus, can you please ask better questions?
And actually, right now, while Rika's finishing up, if you want to write questions, because we're getting to that Q&A time, and then we'll try to collect those.
I'll collect the questions, so pass them to me.
Okay. We won't run through all of these right now. We'll leave these up here as things to think about. How do we enter this moment? What are ways that we challenge the narrative, follow the data, but really looking at the context, keeping learning, advocating, getting proximate. We truly believe that getting proximate, getting close, meeting people, and all of you know this, but meeting real people in real situations can change everything. If we have this feeling of fear, and we've seen this over and over again, I'll like name somebody, Jake, but Jake being sort of frustrated over the years, seeing what was happening at the border, frustrated with US policies, frustrated with what was happening at the border. So he turned to online platforms, he turned to social media, and in doing so, he became fearful, dehumanizing those coming from the South. So when he arrived on a border encounter, that was sort of what he was carrying, this fear. What changed everything for Jake was when we're sitting in a shelter and all of a sudden he sees a mom with a child, right, with a 2-year-old, and something inside of him breaks, where he's like, how could I have gotten to the point where I was thinking of those who were arriving in such a way? And we see this over and over again as people get proximate and as relationships are formed. There's so many things that we can do. These are just some of the ideas, but we'd love, with the rest of our time, to take questions. Kelly, do we already have questions, or should we?
No, we have
go
many.
through some of these?
These are kind of related to what they read through, how we understand it. This is about perceptions, what other people think, and resources.
These are amazing questions, mostly related to many in the room who are already actively involved. And this is, I want to say like something coming from where we're at in a border context and coming here to Wheaton and hearing stories of so many students and adjacent friends of Wheaton that are being involved in protests and coming alongside neighbors and witnessing what ICE is doing and bearing witness. And I think those are some of the most powerful things we can be doing right now, and a lot of the questions are related to that. Is there one that sticks out to you?
Yes. This is a great question. What factors lead recent immigrants in the U.S. to support anti-immigration policies as expressed in the current administration? I am thinking of permanent residents or citizens. I'm really glad you asked. This is a direct result of the Kool-Aid, or the cultural idea that America is number one and is best, And I will have to be very confessional and say until I started working at the border, I might have been one of those people. Not in supporting the enforcement measures, because that's ahead, but in saying really stupid things, such as, I did not come by land, I came by plane. I did not cross the border, I had a visa. And I need you to understand this. When you are othered, and when you are crushed and dehumanized, and you feel that you're lesser than, you will do whatever it takes to get really adjacent to the source of power. So I can confessionally say to you that the first 10 years of my life in this country, I became very small. And I tried to be as white as humanly possible. And that makes you uncomfortable. I'm really sorry, but that is my personal experience. Because upon entry, I was told I wasn't white, but I wasn't black, that I'm a new thing, and the messaging is so powerful. Brown is not okay in the United States. And you can sit there and be like, you're being dramatic. I am not. Because I have had to endure that for 25 years. Spanish accent, not good. Dark skin, not good. Well, guess what? I cannot take that off at night. And so what ends up happening is that my entire existence becomes me proving to you that I am worthy of my humanity. And so I will take accent reduction classes, even if I have to go into debt, because God forbid you think I'm not smart because I have an accent. And I will do whatever it takes to tell you that I'm not an invader. I'm going to do whatever it takes to tell you that I am college educated, not like those people. So the problem with the venom of dehumanization is that it does not discriminate who it poisons. And so we poison ourselves. We drink the venom and we turn against our own communities. And that is part of the lament for me, that you can't even get the immigrant community to support the immigrants. Because we are fully engaged in the system of creating hierarchies for people.
I would add to that in relation to it. I'm thinking of dear family, a dear family in my neighborhood, where the children were, the whole family was undocumented. They had come across the border from Mexico, probably 20 years ago, fleeing violence, but had not entered seeking asylum. And then since then, a couple, and the daughters all had DACA, and so they had, that tenuous status. And a couple of them had married U.S. citizens and had become citizens. And then one of them was starting to be supportive of the rhetoric that was going on. And you had this tension in a family. And one of these daughters is my goddaughter. And she's sharing about this. And part of the challenge, I think, is because for many, from Mexico in particular, who have been living under, who have been living sort of like invisibly for so many years without any avenue for legal status or for a work permit, they would see or they would hear, especially on the news, the same news that everyone else is watching, that all those coming across the border, all of a sudden they have work permits. And that was the case for a while, where while you were seeking your asylum process, you could get a work permit. It's not anything permanent, but you could get a work permit. And that was something that had never happened for those who were undocumented, maybe living here 20, 30 years. So there was this like anger that, oh wow, these new people are coming in and they're getting work permits. And I think that's part of the issue, and it points to a much broader issue where those who have been fighting for many years for comprehensive immigration reform say there are so many troubling things about the system that just don't make sense. We need to address 8 or 10 different pieces altogether, because having these little band-aids here and there just don't make sense. And so when you hear people calling for comprehensive immigration reform, it usually looks similar, like what's been put forward over the last 20 years, bipartisan immigration reform, coming from both sides. It looks sort of similar, but it gets caught up often in Congress. But that's something that where the voice could be used is like where if any of you are interested, like Matt Swarns is in the back here with World Relief, he works on this stuff all the time. Talk to Matt if you're interested in advocacy and figuring out what to do. He's in the, raise your hand, Matt. So Matt is one of the, like on the forefront of a lot of these issues, and he's here locally and an incredible resource.
A lot of your questions have to do with approaching conversations with people who are aggressively against immigrants. How do we kind of engage with people that and some of these questions are just even like hard to read, like because they're aggressively anti-immigrant, and the immigrants are not alien but they're possessed, and I'm like, I am. So I think I'm just going to choose this one, but it says here, how should we as Christians in Chicago process the ICE raids? How should we engage with the hurting communities and families around us? I had this question asked earlier, and I would say it's twofold. Like, I continue to tell people whenever I get in churches, go back to the text. You know, like, we need to stop negotiating and pandering, because then we start creating excuses of why we should be welcoming of immigrants. Or maybe I've heard this in churches, they're going to revitalize your your congregations because there are already people of faith coming, or they're really good for the labor, or I'm like, stop. We are okay with immigration or immigrants because they're made in the image of God. And so for me, that is that's the hill I die on. You know, like, and so I'm willing to engage that conversation till the end of time. Like, we are either in agreement or we are not. Either all people are created in the image of God or they're not. Like, there is no middle ground, because then who's creating the categories? I have yet to sit across from Jesus and he give me the categories. Like, it's an all or nothing. So I shouldn't be trying to convince you. I should be pointing you back to the scripture. And I'm like, go wrestle it with God, you know, because he did not create these categories. So that continues to hurt me and to harm me in ways that I don't have time to explain to you. But that whole conversation about, you're still debating my humanity. And I was made by your God. And it doesn't matter if you don't like my life choices or the color of my skin or my accent. I was made by the same creator, so take it up with the creator. You know, and so if you are getting stuck in those conversations, and my favorite thing is when people say, I've heard this a lot from white people, no disrespect, I'm just really exhausted. I don't think I want to fight this fight anymore. I'm like, well, great, I'm glad you get to take a break. I'm really glad that your sensitivity is just a little much. And the question for you would be, what are you going to do? You know, you have a choice to make. But it's going to be very simple. The first, and I don't know what your political leaning is or whatever, but after the first Trump administration victory, with all this vitriol, right? Like, it was like all these bad hombres and all these rapists, and right? I have kids that are born in this country. They're bilingual, bicultural, and they're asking stuff like, Mom, are you a criminal? No. But aren't you an immigrant? Well, yes. Well, aren't like immigrants criminal? I'm like, oh, thank you, US of A. Now I'm sitting at the dinner table trying to argue my humanity with my 8-year-old. And so it's after that first election, I didn't think that was going to happen, because I was like, I cannot believe that these people that claim to be Christians are going to be okay with this. Like, literally, my humanity is being completely tarnished. And I haven't changed. I'm like, this is really hurtful. And I am being dead honest. My first month after that first victory, I did not leave my house. Why not? Because I was really afraid of people. Because at that point, I didn't know who was for me and who was against me, and I might get really emotional. But it is terrifying to inhabit this body right now. It is terrifying to know that the Supreme Court gave permission for agents, technically only in California, but I can give you faith that it's happening in North Carolina, that I can get stopped and harassed, and my rights will be violated solely because of my brown skin, my Spanish accent, or my privilege of speaking Spanish, which is the language of my heart, the language that I choose to speak, and because I work a low-wage job. It is terrifying, and I cannot take off my skin at night, and I still have 3 years to go. So I'm sorry if you're exhausted, but I'm gonna need you to hydrate and nap and get going. And it's something as small as I need to know who the helpers are. And a way that I can draw a parallel for you is, I heard this from a dear friend who's a member of the LGBTQ community. And he said to me, this is really simple, but when people wear those rainbow bracelets, and I have to make a decision for something as simple as sitting on a bus, that tiny thing makes me feel safe. Like, at least I know I'm not gonna be harassed, I'm not gonna be made fun of, I'm not gonna be hurt, I can just sit there. So I do wonder, what would the equivalent be? You know, and so I've been telling young people, like, get more vocal on social media. Because I'm constantly inundated by like people that are attending my own church. That I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that my whole existence was so problematic, and we worship in the same building and we read the same text, and I don't know what to do with that. Like, I feel unsafe, and I need you to hear me. I feel unsafe. In this room, I don't know which one of you sees me as an insect. I don't know which one of you is already thinking she's full of crap. I don't know. So think of that. What are some ways that we can show solidarity? You know, that will all of a sudden help us know there are helpers. And somebody mentioned there, like the midwives in the story of Moses. There is a call out to the church to step into those places and accompany people and making it abundantly clear. And people say to me, what do you want us to do? I say, I want you to fight for me like you would fight for yourself. Stop fighting like I'm lesser than. Don't be okay with DACA being renewing, like we're taking new applications. Burn it to the ground and give us permanent status. Fight for me like you would fight for you, because you would not be pleased being told that you're not going to have a vote, that you're not going to belong, and that you're going to be second-class citizens. You wouldn't that one for yourself. So why is it okay for me? And so I want you to see me as a sister in front of you. It has to bug you enough to do something. Not doing anything, to me, is like you might as well start spitting on the text, because you're violating the opening sentences of our sacred text. If I'm made in the image of God like you, why are you allowing the image of God to be defiled like that?
We're near the end of our time. Maybe I'll take a stab at this question. And Lika and I are happy to be around and talk some more. This one is like, how do you combat the rhetoric that in order to support other countries in integration, we must be America first? I mean, maybe it's clear, maybe it's not. We believe so clearly, and that's why we started where we did with history and the formation of sort of this special group of people. And maybe this is a message in particular right now for like those of European descent in the room. That this is something that has been absorbed for so long. There's this cocktail that's been absorbed for so long that the culture that's coming out of the United States, that has come out of Europe, the efficiency, the view of time, how we go about relationships, all these cultural elements, like when we go overseas, it's sort of like we're in a way of trying to train. So myself, as someone whose parents and is like ethnically is of European heritage, but of course growing up in the Middle East in a pretty fully Arab context, witnessing people coming from the United States, even missionaries, or from Europe, and it's sort of this mix that comes together that everything is a little bit better, right? Like a bit better educated. I got the education, I have the know-how, I have all of the right ways of doing something, and also I have the right form of theology that also came out of Europe 500 years ago. All of these things sort of came out at the same time. And to come and sort of the audacity to arrive in the Middle East, like the birthplace of Jesus of Nazareth, within Christian communities that have been there since the time of Jesus, sort of with the right version of Christianity. There's something that is soaked into, I think, like this feeling that where we come out thinking America first. And it's more than just America, right? It's a certain part of America that links itself back to the doctrine of discovery, where European Christians are better than, and then manifest destiny, where English-speaking, European origin Protestant Christians are better than, and moving west, and these things that have led to slavery, right? And so when we see this rhetoric today, and when we think about how do we combat that in order, this mentality, like what do we do with America first? To me, I don't quite understand it. Partially, I think in large part because I didn't grow up here. Because for me, it's so obvious that the God of the universe cares for my Palestinian neighbor very, very deeply, and cares for my Colombian neighbor very, very deeply, and doesn't care that much about modern-day nation states. And if I'm following in the footsteps of Jesus of Nazareth, I'm not even, like, that's not even something that I'm, like, thinking about too much, or wanting to defend in any way. In fact, maybe trying to dismantle that. Jesus himself was doing this all the time in the Gospels, right? Like, the Jewish community, his community, was trying to like pin him down in terms of who is my neighbor, right? Like that was the question. It's like in order to justify himself, he says, who is my neighbor? And what does Jesus do? He goes on to talk about a foreigner, a despised foreigner, different language, different race, who was the hero of the story, who actually took care of somebody. And he's like, that is the way you're supposed to function in the world. You are not to be drawing lines about who your neighbor is. And so as people of Jesus, that is, in my opinion, what we are following. And so if we can't get to the root of that, then I don't know how we can go about talking, saying about how do we prioritize America first or something else first. But I think if there's something inside you that's sort of like pushing against that sort of like nationalistic mentality, I would say that's like sit with that. Don't ignore it. When we ignore those things, those little tugs at our heart, that's when our hearts go hard. Listen to that, and the next time it comes up, listen a little bit more and explore it, and listen some more, and listen in community, and listen in community of people that don't look like you or your community, and listen some more, and try to absorb those things to the point where hopefully Jesus can dissolve whatever it is that's separating us from our neighbor, to the point where we're not going to ask, who is my neighbor? Because we know this human being made in God's image next to us is our neighbor. And we want to fight alongside them just as we would someone who looks like us or someone who's from our same nationality. There are so many questions in here that we didn't get to. Thank you so much for tonight.